What is a hero? A mythological figure, often of divine descent, endowed with great strength or ability? An illustrious warrior? No. It's a person admired for achievements and noble qualities, one who shows great courage. Welcome to the What's a Hero podcast, where we dive deep into what a hero is and what makes them that hero. I'm your host, Ken Frownfelter, and I'm going to be introducing you to some of the world's most likely and unlikely heroes. You may have never heard of them before, and they most likely have never met you. But they all have one thing in common. They are ready to do whatever it takes to help make you better, even if it means sacrificing everything for you. Let's get into it.
This is episode 52 of the What's a Hero podcast with me, Ken Frownfelter. Now, as life has gone on through the centuries, there have always been people who have been able to kind of develop and speak into the lives of their fellow man in a way that kind of opens it up so we can understand better. And what I mean by that is we understand things. As humans, we understand life. We understand the generalities of things. However, there'd be somebody that would come along, let's say Plato, for instance, and he would come along and he would say something in a certain way, and people all of a sudden are understanding of what he's saying, and they're able to apply that and say, hey, I see this in a different light. And I've mentioned this before on previous episodes where I've had guests on, and we've talked about just changing your lens and the way you look at it. That will change the way that you see something, and then all of a sudden, you're able to make an adjustment in how you're living or what you're doing in that process. You fast forward through the centuries, you've had people like Shakespeare who have come along, and we understand life, but he's so eloquent with his words that he's able to now form this into stories because he understands how people are. He understands how people act. And it's huge. And we've used that for centuries. You fast forward. Let's go back even further. You look at Jesus. He obviously understood humans. He understood man. But he was able to tell us stories in his parables, how it is that we develop and how it is that we should act, and how it is that the reason we act certain ways is because of XYZ. And so we've learned all these lessons through these great orators, these great storytellers, these people who have willing to put pen to paper or quill to parchment, whatever you want to say, and have developed this throughout the ages to where we understand things. More recently, you take someone like Lord Moran. If you're not familiar with Lord Moran, I suggest you look him up. Genius of a man. And he developed a whole understanding of the soldier during World War II. And then you fast forward that to Lord Moran was World War I. World War II was a gentleman named S.L.A. Marshall. And he also looked at men from World War II, Korea, Vietnam, the soldier in general, and how it is. Because if you look at war expands humanality. War expands basically how we're going to react to something on grand scales. And so if we can understand, let's say, bullet points of certain things, break those things down from that point, understand how to be human based off of our worst, we should be able to develop how to be humans based off of our best. Now, I fast forward, and my guest today is one who I would consider on par with these gentlemen that I have just spoken about, but I know he wouldn't consider himself a Shakespeare. He tries to be like Jesus, and he fails because he is human. However, he understands that life is what it is, and this is the best way to go about doing it, and he's willing to talk about it, and he's willing to talk about himself. A personal note from him is, I am a soldier of 24 years service. I've been a sergeant in the 82nd Airborne Division, a platoon leader in the 9th High-Tech Test Bed Division, and I have been a general staff officer and a company commander in the 7th Light Infantry Division. I am a parachute infantryman and an Army Ranger. I've been deployed to the Arctic tundras, the Central American jungles, NATO headquarters, the Warsaw Pact, and countless mountains and deserts. I am a graduate of military schools ranging from the 18th Airborne Corps NCO Academy to the British Army Staff College. I graduated summa cum laude from the undergraduate training as a historian and Kappa Delta Pi from my graduate training as a psychologist. I have had the privilege of being a co-speaker with General Westmoreland before the national leadership of the Vietnam Veterans Coalition of America, and I have served as the keynote speaker for the 6th Annual Convention of the Vietnam Veterans of America. I have served in academic positions ranging from a junior high school counselor to a West Point psychology professor, and I have served as the professor of military science and chair of the Department of Military Science at Arkansas State University. But for all this experience, I, like Richard Holmes, John Keegan, Patty Griffith, and many others who have gone before me in this field, have not killed in combat. Perhaps I could not be as dispassionate and objective as I need to be if I had to carry a load of emotional pain myself. But the men whose words fill this study have killed. And that is an excerpt from the book called On Killing. And the author of that book is so gracious to be our guest today, and that is Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. Welcome to the show, sir. How are you?
Oh, Ken, that's just about one of the nicest intro I've ever had. And how well done. You know, I love working with the Marine Corps. They are amazingly literate. You know, they're always reading. I think it's all that time at sea. You know, we make fun about eating the crayons, you know. And, you know, I had a mom sign a book for her Marine Corps son, and she had me sign it with a crayon that she had personally bought. And his mom talking to her son with crayons. But the truth is that we're raising a generation of literate warriors. I call this a warrior renaissance. We've learned more about the psychology and physiology of combat in the last 50 years than the previous 5,000 years put together. And everyone, you ever wonder what it felt like in the early days of the Renaissance? Da Vinci and all these guys. They didn't call it the Renaissance at first, but this is what it felt like. This explosion of knowledge, and people, you talk about Lord Moran and S.L.A. Marshall, and we pull these people together and we bring ourselves to a higher level of understanding. So I love the theme of your show about heroes. I'm not a hero, but I've had an honor to talk to an awful lot of them, and it's been a great ride, and I'm eager to share, within that perspective of what's a hero thing.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, and I've had people come on here before, and they've said that same thing. Well, I'm no hero, and I wouldn't invite you on if I didn't think so. And I know you're a humble man, and but it is one of those things that we don't realize who we are. We don't realize the change we help put into people by the way that we act, or the things that we put to paper, or the way we interact with people. I've said it before a million times on this podcast, and I'll say it again. It's that little pebble that we drop in a pond. Those ripples go out, and they go forever until they're stopped by something else. And for the most part,
well said. Let me give you a couple of ideas in my mind about how somebody becomes a hero. I got a couple stories you might like.
Okay, cool.
There was two police officers in West Memphis, Arkansas, were murdered by a couple of white supremacists, father and son, sovereign nation. And cops from every direction were coming on dragnet to hunt these down. And one of the cops is a guy named Mike Neal. He was a fish and game officer. 90 miles away, 100 miles an hour, comes to join this dragnet. And he pulls into the Walmart in West Memphis, Arkansas. And these two idiots, father and son, had murdered two cops and just went to Walmart, went shopping, just got on with their life. And the sheriff and a deputy were pinned down behind the police car. The sheriff didn't have a gun. The sheriff was a destroyed human being. He didn't even run for re-election. I mean, to be caught at that moment without a gun, it was just such a tragic event. But these two are leaning out the windows of their van, shooting these two behind a vehicle. And Mike Neal pulls in and contacts local dispatch and said, "I found your bad guys." They got a couple of people pinned down in the Walmart parking lot behind their police vehicle. And the dispatch didn't believe him, didn't know who it was, didn't know what's going on. And he said, "Well, I don't have time to mess with this." And so he floored his fishing game truck, and he slammed into the van these two were in. And then he grabbed his AR, which he'd had on the passenger seat beside him, and he had his own ammo that he instead of issue ammo, he had his own tap rounds because he wanted to be able to penetrate metal. And he killed them both, just multiple rounds through the vehicle, through the back seats, hammered both of the two killers and killed them both. And I had the honor to interview him.
Mm.
He said, he said, I'm the kind of cop how the cops make fun of. He said, they don't make fun of me no more. He said he's the, he was the officer of the year, been awarded, and he's now Sheriff Mike Neal of the county in Arkansas, had several other gunfights, shot more bad guys than the flu vaccine. But I always loved that line. I'm the kind of cop other cops make fun of. He said, they don't make fun of me no more.
That's cool.
And my message, is to be that kind of cop, to push that envelope. He's the guy that he said, if anybody ever needs a backup weapon, I've got it. If they need more ammo, I got it. If they need an extra piece of rain gear or an extra piece of cold weather gear, well, it just so happens I've got one. His truck is and that's a hero. So I'll tell you a story again. When things are coming unglued, but things are going bad, and things are very bad, and I want to talk about that to you very quickly. We don't understand how desperately bad it's become. But Ranger School is a time when you kind of strip down to your essentials. No sleep, no food, and you really strip down. So in the first segment of Ranger School, we didn't have the desert phase then, so it was an extensive phase at Fort Benning. Mm-hmm. And we're coming out of that. Most of us hadn't eaten for the last 24 hours or so. We hadn't slept for the last couple of days. We're physically exhausted. And we were cycling out, to get just 24 hours out, and then boom, we'd punch out to the mountains, and then punch to Florida, and everybody's just wiped out. Mm. And this big, tall Marine lieutenant had, we had the outhouse there, and you got to turn in your map at the end of the patrol. And if you lose your map, you failed. You're out of Ranger School. It's done. All this pain and all this suffering, And this guy was in the outhouse, and the map falls out of the cargo pocket in his pants, and falls into this pile of crap out in the outhouse.
No, gross.
And this guy comes back to the squad, and I mean, like the platoon. He comes back to our platoon about 20 Rangers, smoked and wiped out. And he says, I dropped my map into the outhouse. I need somebody to just hold my feet. So I just hold my feet so I can pull it out of the outhouse. I can't quite reach it. And everybody looks at him, and they're like, they're just drones. They're lost,
Yeah.
I said, I got mad. I said, you bunch of dirtbags. He said, he's not asking to dip into the ship with you. He just asked you to hold his legs. You bunch of
He's going to do it.
Just with you all. And my buddy, Jim Boyle, and I, we've gone through OCS together. We've gone through Infantry Officer Advanced Course together. We've been NCOs in the 82nd, not together, but, and I said, Jim Boyle, let's go dip this Marine in the ship. There's like this hatch in the back of the thing, and we're grabbing him by the pants, by the belt. And each got a hand onto the belt, and each got a hand, I've got a leg wrapped around it. And this guy's gagging and choking, and he reaches in, he grabs his map, we pull him on out of there. So we go to turn in all of our equipment, right? And we're all sloshing this with our canteen and wiping it off in the grass,
Yeah.
He goes to turn this into the Ranger sergeant. And the sergeant looks at it and like, what is this? But you got your map, Ranger. You're good.
Yeah.
So then we all go and do our peer evals. And everybody in the platoon peers everybody else from number 1 to number 20. And I thought, I'm going to get peered out. And I don't care. I'm done with these dirtbags. I'm done with this, this whole thing. And it just, my buddy Jim Boyle and I, and we'd done well in that first segment, and we were the kind of guys that if the patrol was held up at a riverbed, well, we'd take half of them to the left and half of them to the right and make 3 crossings. What a concept! You've been there with a whole line of guys waiting for somebody to get through some little obstacle,
right?
Let's go here and go there, and we'll cross it 3 places, come out the other end, because this place is no better than any other place. We're all scrambling out there, and Jim Boyle and I, we're doing that kind of thing, and So anyway, we were called in to the ranger captain who was in charge. He was our tactical officer who moves with the class. He said, Ranger Grossman, I got some bad news for you. I've been peered out. I'm done. I don't care. He said, I'm moving you and Ranger Boyle to two different platoons. I told him, well, I'm just glad that I'm still there, you know.
Right.
I said, well, why, sir? He said, well, everybody in the platoon peered you and Boyle number 1 and number 2. And we got to split up that kind of leadership and give everybody a chance, you know. And it was just like the missed opportunity of a lifetime. If I'd have just told them, well, sir, I'm just another drone. You know, that happened because we dipped this Marine in the outhouse, you see.
Right.
And it would have been legendary. I mean, I missed my opportunity.
Right.
But, you know, I said, sir, I promise I'll just be another drone in the next patrol, you know, a little more sleep deprivation, and you'll lose me too, you know.
Right.
But to my mind, you know, that's what a hero is. The one when everybody else is out of gas is still moving. The one who has the extra ammo in their vehicle and the one who has their own rounds. You know, Sheriff Mike Neal's a hero. Yeah. You know, I'm just given a psychological situational dynamic to understand that when things are coming unglued, when people are wiped out, when they're dying, when they're without food and without sleep, it's the one who has the energy to lead the way. And I'll tell you all that because I want you to understand just how desperately bad this situation is.
Yeah.
Medical technology is holding down the murder rate. Comparing the murder rate over any period of time is like comparing minimum wage without allowing for inflation. So imagine somebody said, you make $25 an hour. Your grandpa made 25 cents an hour. Look how good you have it. Well, we all immediately spot the lie in that. We all know about inflation. But people constantly compare the murder rates over time without allowing for medical technology. And it's a lie. Yeah, and we got to pierce that lie and understand.
Yeah, didn't you mention that in On Killing, I think, in where you talked about that 3 out of 4 murders wouldn't or
Yes.
3 out of 4 people have been saved out of murder victims.
Yes.
Because, and so they turn out not to be murders because of medical technology.
Yes. You know, and you mentioned On Killing. I really recommend On Combat also.
Yeah.
It's also on the Commandant's list. And we dig in a little deeper into that. And then we really dig in my book, Assassination Generation, talking about that.
Right.
But so the data you're quoting from On Killing is actually, where are we now? It's actually almost 30 years old.
Yeah. So
we have one good data set, I guess 20 years old, 20.
Yeah.
But we have one good data set, a UMass Harvard study, a peer-reviewed journal, between the 1960s and the 1990s. Medical technology cut murder to a third or quarter would otherwise be. That is, compare the murders between the 90s and the 60s. You got to multiply by a factor of 3 or 4, right? And the leaps and bounds of technology since the 1990s are astounding. So tourniquets alone have cut the murder rate in half in just the last decade.
Right.
You know, cops collapse on a tourniquet, saves a crime victim's life, you're prevented a murder. So to compare murders between the 60s and today, you got to multiply by a factor of at least 7 and probably much more. So with that said now, the highest annual increase in homicides we ever saw, because the annual increase is good data, it's just over time the comparison breaks down. Now, the highest annual increase we ever saw was 1 year in the 1960s. It went up 12%. In 2020, homicides were up 30%. 3 times worse than we've ever seen. But if we allow for medical technology, it's actually 20 times worse. 2020 was 20 times worse annual increase in violence than we've ever seen. Now, I was invited to the White House as part of President Trump's roundtable on violent video games, personally handed him a copy of my book, Assassination Generation, slid it across the table to the president, kind of tapped his water glass. Like, ooh. It was cool. And then I was invited to the White House again to brief the vice president, gave him a copy of my book, Assassination Generation. And another very gracious, impressive guy, Vice President Pence, and he asked a very intelligent question. He said, what about the aggravated assault rate? I said, it's too easy to fudge that data. Every cop will tell you we'll make egg assault say what do you want it to say? Where do we draw that magic line to an egg assault and simple assault? You know, it's like grade inflation in the school. But dead is dead. Murder is good data as long as we allow for medical technology. We have inflation-adjusted dollars. We need medically adjusted murders.
Yes.
So there was a bump in 2015 and 2016. The FBI guys called the Ferguson effect. In 2015 and 2016, homicides exploded like nothing we've ever seen before until now. The 2020 blew that out of the water. But that was the Ferguson effect. And then 5 cops murdered in Dallas. And President Obama confronted this defund the police conspiracy theory. The goofiest, most dangerous, most harmful conspiracy theory in modern history is defund the police.
Right.
The idea that the cops are the bad guys and criminals are the good guys. It eats at the very fabric of our civilization. It must be confronted at every level.
Yeah, you asked
Obama.
You asked the victim, is that true? I mean, because you got that 3-prong, because you got the victim, you've got the police officer, and you've got the suspect or the subject or the criminal. Yes. And now, if we're just looking at criminal police officer, we're totally forgetting the victims.
Yes. And so I can show you how many lives were lost because of the Ferguson effect. I can show you a number of murdered people, and then multiply by quite a bit more. It represents, like by a factor of 7, it represents how many more people were hospitalized and crippled and injured and assaulted, and their lives were saved because of modern technology. But in 2020, so President Obama was there at the funeral of 5 dead cops in Dallas. And he said, stop this stupid stuff. He said, we need our cops. We need our cops. You stop this stuff. Obama, kind of obliquely confronted the defund the police myth. And for a couple of years, it bubbled back down. And then the George Floyd effect. And this constant mantra from the media that the cops are the bad guys. The media has blood on their hands, and they got to point the finger somewhere else. Things are coming unglued, and they got to point the finger somewhere else. And so 2020 was and it was not happening in other nations. It's not about the pandemic. It's happening in America, and it was a George Floyd effect. This sick concept that criminals are the good guys.
Right.
We pay a horrible price for it. So 2020, the wheels came off the bus. It was 20 times worse, anything we've ever seen before. If 2021 had stayed the same, it would be bad. But 2021 was even worse. Compound interest stacked on top of it. We don't have the final federal report. It's not quite as much of an annual increase, but it's on top of 2020. If it had stayed the same, it would be bad. The wheels have come off the bus. The world's coming unglued, and people don't even know it. And so it's a time to be the kind of cop other cops make fun of. It's a time to push the limit, to carry that backup gun, to carry your gun off duty, to seek that extra training, to push that envelope, to seek the mental preparation and the spiritual preparation. To man the ramparts in this dark and desperate hour.
Yes.
And that comes down to the core of what makes a hero.
Right. Yeah, no, that's I am going to have to take those and frame those as words on all of my social media for that, because that's exactly right. That is what makes the hero. And you take all these people that don't think of themselves, they're just like, I'm just going and doing my job because it's if not me, then who? And sure enough, that's exactly what they're being, and they don't whether they want to call themselves or not. That's what they're being. So that is absolutely right. So
again,
go ahead.
This whole defund the police. Before we leave that topic, the president and the State of Union address just confronted it for whatever. He's not putting money behind it, but put words behind it.
Right.
The most gutless politician out there should have the ammo to stand up and say, defund the police is wrong.
Right.
When the black female police chief of Seattle quits. Now, this lady's worked her way up through the ranks. She's respected. You can't accuse her of racism, can't accuse her of sexism. And she told Seattle, said, you set me up for failure. I quit.
Right.
The black female police chief of Dallas, same situation. I don't have to put up this BLM stupidity. I'm out of here. Right. And she quit. If those ladies can't do the job, who can? So 99 out of 100 senators voted to a non-binding agenda, but that to vote against defund the police, that it was morally, psychologically and politically wrong.
Right.
I mean, every gutless politician in America should now have the cover to stand up and confront defund the police.
Yes.
And it's done us great harm. But, we've turned the tide. We've said, no, this is wrong. Mm-hmm. But in the meanwhile, we've done enormous damage. Who wants to be a cop? Who would want to be a cop? The retention is down, recruiting is down. Mm-hmm. Who would want to serve in these tragic times? Right. And we'll talk about that.
Yeah, we've had conversations like of guys that I work with. We've had those conversations. We have new folks coming in. We're like, who would want to do it nowadays? But you mentioned On Combat that exact thing, that society cannot be society without, if we started from scratch and we decided we're going tabula rasa and we're going very low and we're having a blank slate, we got to start society over again. What are the things that we need the most of right away? The first, if not maybe the second, would be we need security. We need to know that we can now work within that structure of security. And who do we get to do that? We get those sheepdogs, like you mentioned before. And so that's huge. Yes.
It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. First we need food and shelter, mm-hmm. and then we need security. Mm-hmm. And there's the sheepdogs. But right. the social contract, the Pharaoh, the Romans, our mm-hmm. government, every government has a contract. Here's the deal. You pay your taxes, you obey the law, and we'll help keep you safe. Ain't that the deal?
Right.
If we can't keep them safe, why would they obey the law? Mm-hmm. Why would they pay their taxes?
Right.
And that's what's happening, this breakdown of civilization, this chaos and despair. Mm-hmm. So why do we keep doing it? Well, I'm 65 years old. I just got back from driving to Louisville and training 2 days in Louisville and driving back again. Just got back late yesterday. Mm-hmm. Why do I keep doing it? I've got my bride of 46 years, my high school sweetheart, waiting at home for me, and she's not in the best of health right now. She's still hanging in there. She mm-hmm. supports what I do. She was 15. I was 17 when I proposed to her. We are from Arkansas.
Nice.
2 years later, she married a crazy Army paratrooper. So I love her more than life itself. So why do we spend this? It's my prayer I can keep doing what I do for another 20 years.
Right.
You get cool points to do it at 65 or 85. You're really setting a standard there.
Sure,
that's my goal. But why? Well, because I love my children. Mm-hmm. I love my grandchildren. Mm-hmm. I love my nation. I love my God. And if we truly love our families and truly love our nation and love our God, we'll walk out that door and give 100%. Our nation is sick.
Yeah.
Do we abandon our loved ones when they're sick? Do we have a sick child? It's all right, I'm out of here. It's your problem. And you leave? No.
No, you stay right there.
If you had a sick child, you would empty the bank account. You'd start a fund. You'd do a fundraiser. You'd search the internet for any help you could find. You or your spouse would quit their job to be with their child full time. That's what love mm-hmm. means. Mm-hmm. A song I like to mention to every of my class, an old country western song by Kenny Rogers. You picked a fine time to leave me, Lucille.
Right.
4 hungry children and a crop in the field.
Right.
I've had some hard times, lived through some sad times. This time the hurt won't heal. You picked a fine time to leave Lucille. Yeah, and the idea of a mother abandoning her children and 4 hungry children, a crop in the field.
Right.
I mean, that's just so sad.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's what we're talking about. If we love our God, if we love our nation, if we love our family, now is the time to walk out that door and give 100%.
Right.
I think the foundation of being a hero is love, sacrificial love. Mm-hmm. The only thing on the planet that overrides the instinct to self-preservation is love. A mama critter will die for her baby. She won't die for anybody else's babies. Mm-hmm. Audie Murphy is the most decorated American soldier in World War II. He's asked one time why he did it. The answer is very simple. They were killing my friends.
Right.
Audie Murphy was ready to die for his friends.
Right.
But what kind of people walk out the door and lay down their life for strangers? Right. What manner of love is this? That men and women will walk out that door and put their life on the line for people they haven't even met. And so I tell you, love is that great motivator. It is the mm-hmm. only force on the planet stronger than the instinct to self-preservation. And we must embrace it. And the opposite of evil is not good. The opposite of evil is love.
Right. Yes.
Evil is the absence of love, just as darkness is the absence of light. And we fight this evil with love. And the only thing in the universe you can control is yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You can't control what those idiots are doing. You can't control what other cops are doing. You can't control anything in the universe except yourself right now.
Right.
And if we give weight to bitterness, if we give weight to cynicism or complacency or denial, that's the one thing you can control.
Right.
And you've given the world a victory of their hand, you will not do it.
Right.
We will not give them that victory.
Right.
So I'll give you an angle on this now, on that business of yourself, the one thing you can control. It's easy to say, it's not so easy to do.
Yeah.
When somebody's in your face, it's hard. If you lose your temper, you didn't lose your temper, you gave it away.
Right.
The one thing in the universe you could control was yourself. And you let this person take that away from you.
Mm-hmm.
So I retired from the Army 25 years ago. I've been on the road over 200 days a year. And by almost any definition, I believe I'm the only law enforcement trainer ever to be post-certified in all 50 states, or the equivalent thereof. And as probably America's #1 law enforcement trainer, I've been under constant attack from Antifa and defund the police. We get emails that'll curl your hair. It says what they're going to do to my family, what they're going to do to us,
right.
On and on and on. And I can't control what this idiot sends, but they're trying to hurt me with that letter. If I let it hurt me, they win, right?
Right.
So I've got some candy I keep in the vault there to keep my dog out of it. We've got a chocolate lab whose only purpose in life is to find chocolate somewhere in the house.
I've got one. I've got a boxer that does that.
I got some chocolates there, and about once a week or so, I let myself have one.
Uh-huh.
And when I get one of these nasty grams, I get a piece of chocolate. I almost look forward to it. Oh, I get a piece of chocolate. So I talk about that in my class, and they say, "You evil bastard! We tell you how evil you are, and you get a chocolate-covered cherry." Yeah. So who wins now?
Right.
Take what they meant for evil and turn it to good. And here's what I tell my cops. It's just a little thing, but it's rational cognitive therapy. It really does work.
Mm-hmm.
Have some candy in your car. I like Tootsie Rolls. They're individually wrapped, so they stay clean.
Mm-hmm.
They're good in the heat. They're good in the cold, and they remind me of Halloween candy.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So when somebody gets in your face, you say, you know what? Because of you, I get to go back to my car and I get a Tootsie Roll.
Get candy.
and I'm telling you, when you get angry, it's sympathetic nervous system fight or flight response.
Uh-huh.
And parasympathetic processes are calming. A drink of water,
right,
or a Tootsie Roll in your mouth. When when you're out of control, grab a Tootsie Roll, pop it in your mouth, and the very act of chewing and swallowing and putting nutrition in your body, you've got fight or flight, and the backlash, the opposite, is rest and digest.
Mm-hmm.
When you put food, it's sometimes called feed or breed, fight or flight, feed or breed, the 4 F's. Right?
Uh-huh.
But this food in your stomach, it creates parasympathetic responses. And it says, I'm safe. We have time to eat. When you're in fight or flight mode, you don't have time to I'm being chased by a wolf. I don't have time to take a drink of water.
Right.
You take a drink of water, you put nutrition in your body, and it sends a powerful calming message. So the only thing in the world we can control in the face of these horrific times, in the face of these incredible threats, in the face of all these people who truly believe the cops are evil, who've been told that.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you maintain your calm? How do you respond to hate with love? Because love is the opposite of evil. Love is the opposite of hate. And you do that by manifesting decency and kindness. And it begins with your family.
Right.
We should ask God for more love for our spouse. We can ask for more faith. We really should. We talk about, look, you say, I wish there was a God. I wish there was a loving God. I wish there was a God. Well, that's your little seed of faith. That's your little seed of belief. It's okay to ask for more. And we should ask for more faith. The disciples asked Jesus, tell us how to have greater faith. And we should also ask for more love.
Right. And I've talked about on here, I said, there's nothing that compares to how we feel when you actually serve somebody. And it doesn't always have to be, you know, going to the soup kitchen and filling that, or, you know, whatever. But actually going out of your way, and you're standing there and you see stuff going on and you say, you know what? Or you've been to an event and you see people are tearing it down after it's over, and you're still kind of there, and you see people, you know, taking the trash out, or they're piling trash by the door. Hey, you know, help them out. Let's do something, and you'll be amazed at it's just those little tiny things. What's going to happen when you serve just one more person?
Oh, such a good feeling it gives. And you know, I met a guy, his goal was to make 20 people smile every day.
There you go. Yeah.
And they just, that's why that mask is so evil. You know, you can't see their smile. You can't see their face. You can't communicate. And that is so destructive and harmful in so many ways. But, you know, I've learned during the mask time is to give that thumbs up, and people love that.
Yeah.
And you give them that thumbs up and that smile, and they'll smile back.
Yes, absolutely.
And try to keep track of just, you know, or you say, you know, we were, you know, I passed, you know, people, I'm in the store and there's somebody stocking the shelves. And I said, thank you for what you do for us every day.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. You know, I'm at the register and said, you know, hey, thanks for what you do for us. Keep hanging in there. We need you. And people are just, you know, so grateful for any kindness. And that really comes back to something, you know, there's a lot of talk about de-escalation. And to de-escalate people, you have to be calm yourself. Before you can calm anybody else down, you have to be calm yourself. And that comes from training and mindset. But I really think that there are the three most important questions you will ever ask is the core of de-escalation. Wrap your mind around these three. Number one, please tell me what's wrong.
Right.
You know, I said that to my wife just the other night. She's hurting. You know, I said, tell me what's wrong. And she said, thank you for asking. Number one, please tell me what's wrong. Number two, I'm sorry this is happening to you. You can do that with your spouse. You can do this with your kids. And you can do that to somebody who's having a crisis. I'm sorry for what's happening to you. That validates them. That gives them empathy. It's just one of the most powerful things you can say to them.
Yeah.
And the third sentence, I will do everything in my power to help you. And those three sentences, for anybody with a problem, your child comes up with you know, they're low, their spirits are low, they're troubled, your spouse, people you meet every day, you know, just that first question, please tell me what's wrong. And I'm sorry that happened to you. We forget that all the time. We make a joke, just, I'm sorry that happened to you.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'll do everything in my power to help.
You're not going to say, I'll fix this, or I'm going to take care of it. No, you're acknowledging that you have limits too, because you're human, but you're able to say anything I can do, I will try to make it better based off of my skills or ability or whatever. Yeah.
Yes, everything in my power.
Yeah.
So people, you know, embrace that, and that's us communicating love to people out there in their worst hour every day. You know, it's the worst of times, it's the best of times. Because if you're there for them with competence and courage and compassion in the darkest hour, they will never forget.
Right.
You know, we've got our Sheepdog Kids book. We really, the Sheepdog Kids book, you know, Sheepdogs Meet America's Warriors. It's really, kids have embraced it. It's done a lot of neat things. And it talks about being the sheepdog and being the protector. And how, you know, the motivation is love. But we talk about the fact they're not heroes because they die. They're heroes because they walk out the door every day prepared to lay down their life.
Right.
Sometimes the greatest love is not to sacrifice your life, but to live a life of sacrifice. You know, Jesus said, greater love is known than this. They lay down their life for their friends. But there's many ways to lay down your life. And a lifetime of selfless service, a lifetime of being there for people in their darkest hour. That's a hero.
Excellent.
The people are there when everything's coming unglued, when people are cursing them and in their face every day. The people are motivated by love to be there for them in their darkest hour, to do something kind for them, take the garbage on the way out. You know, just some little token that I care about you and I'm going to be here for you in your darkest hour. And we have the power to win the hearts and minds of our citizens, because when the bad things happen, they will never forget that we were there for them. One question I ask cops a lot, you know, they pick me up at the airport and we're driving to the hotel, you know, train the next morning. One of the things I try to get around to asking is, why did you become a cop?
Mm-hmm.
And a cop told me something recently. He said, when I was growing up, in the whole, supply and demand equation of law enforcement, my family was on the supply side. A lot of bad things happened in my family.
Yeah.
A lot of bad things happened when I was growing up. He said, whenever cops showed up, things got better. And that makes hair stand up on my head.
Yeah.
That's why I'm a cop.
Yeah.
That's why I wanted to be a cop.
Yeah.
And whenever a cop showed up, things got better. That chokes me up.
Yeah.
That's what
I asked that same story. I asked that same thing of younger guys, and I'll say, I had one guy. He was a younger guy, and he was just starting out. And I said, one of the things you're going to do is you're going to get asked that question, why are you doing this? And you have to be able to know why you're doing it, because there's going to come a time that you're going to hate people. You're going to be so sickened by this victim mentality or the predator mentality or whatever the case is, these evil things that you see. You're going to be so angry with the whole thing, and you're going to hate people, and you're going to have to remember why you continue to serve. Is there some intrinsic value inside of you? And you have to remember that. And he said, okay, I'll keep that in mind. Well, you fast forward a couple years, and he's now, he's a veteran officer, all this different stuff. And he goes, hey, I want to thank you. And I was walking through the hallway, and I said, oh, what's going on? What's up? He said, remember that conversation we had when I hadn't even got hired yet, and we were just doing a ride along? And I said, maybe I don't remember necessarily. And he said, no, it was about, you asked me know my why about why I'm doing this. I said, oh yeah, okay, I remember. He says, today is that day. Today, and you look on his face, and he was so defeated. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, I don't want to be here. I miss my family. I'm tired of being here. I'm on overtime. I'm having to stay late. He was logging in some evidence, and it was just a big case that he was working. And he goes, and these people, I just cannot stand them. And it's not because it was compounding. It wasn't those specific people, just over and over and over again. And he hadn't given himself to take that break, given him that opportunity. He goes, I got to remember my why. And so he goes, but I thank you for that, for saying that. Because like we said before, you never know what's going to happen beforehand. And you have to know your why. And if you can
it's funny, because the next thing I wanted to talk about to your audience was my book on spiritual combat.
Oh, yeah.
I wrote on killing, and I thought what was at the core of combat was the act of killing. And then I realized it was auditory exclusion, slow motion time, tunnel vision, aftermath. And I realized that it's on combat. Combat is really the more important book in many ways.
Yes, I really like that book. I absolutely.
I'm glad you feel that way. Thank you.
Yeah.
But after those two, and a lot of in between books, I'm going to fight the good fight for another 20 years. But after writing on spiritual combat, that the Lord could call me home tomorrow, and I've done my job. and I've got a sequel coming out. We're about 95% done with the sequel on spiritual combat, Volume 2.
Very cool.
And really, we asked the question, why are we here? What's our mission? God really tells us right up front. Jesus says to love God and to love others as yourself.
Right.
And these are the commandments in a nutshell. There is no law beyond this. This is the heart and soul of who we are and what we do. To love God and to love others.
Right.
And he said, in 4 words, love God, love people. And if we truly love God and love people, then we'll bring them to the knowledge of salvation. And the way we do that is through doing good deeds and never growing weary of doing good. So being a good model, being a positive model. Right. And that's you and your spouse. It begins with your spouse. It begins with your children and your family. And how you interact with others. You planted a seed, a beautiful, joyful seed of why are we here? Yeah. But here's the key. And people say, why does God allow all these evil things to happen? Well, see, we're not God's puppets. We don't want to be God's meat puppets. You don't want to be a meat puppet. I don't want to be, Satan. They're meat puppets. The ones that are under control of the evil one, they're his puppets. But God has given us free will. He loves us enough to let go.
Right.
And we wouldn't want to, God, do this, do that. Well, that's not the way he works. He put you there to help make things better.
Right.
And he gave us free will. And that means people make bad decisions. And I say in the book, a retired Marine gunny who becomes a cop, and he tries to witness to everybody comes through. And one little dirtbag, he said, he just beat up a lady, this old lady. And this guy says, I'm just a piece of shit. And he said, my God doesn't make pieces of shit.
Right.
It makes people sometimes make bad decisions.
Right.
and boom, that says it all. But here's the key.
Exactly.
Here's the heart of it. It's all about eternity.
Mm-hmm.
When our nation will fall, our planet will die, our sun will die.
Yeah.
But eternity in heaven continues.
Mm-hmm.
So if you really grasp that perspective, don't pray for a few extra years. Don't pray for less suffering, because those things are nothing compared to eternity in heaven.
Yes.
And God will take all these bad things and make them a tool to have good things happen.
Right.
And so we got to get that eternal perspective. If we understand that eternity, if you really grasp the unthinkable immensity of eternity, it goes on forever. If you really, boom, all right, I got eternity, then the lifespan of our sun shrinks to an indiscernible nothing.
Right.
Either eternity goes on forever, or if you make eternity finite, then any period of time shrinks to nothing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the lifespan of us, our few brief flickering seconds on this world are nothing compared to eternity. So we use this time to be a model to others, to do good, be a living model. And the crazy part is, we give the honor and glory to God, and He gives us love, joy, and peace.
Yeah.
If we seek honor for ourselves, it's an empty hole that we can never fill up.
Yeah.
But if we give the honor to God, then the joy that comes from serving, and that's all in the book on spiritual combat. I think it's terribly important. It's the heart of the matter. And you talked about looking at evil.
Yeah.
If you look at evil and you don't have a force for good on your side, you're doomed.
Right.
You see supernatural evil all around you. You can't deny the force of evil in this world. So you've got to believe in a supernatural force for good, and you want to be on their side.
Right.
And you know what? Say, God, show yourself to me. He don't work that way. 11 of the 12 disciples were murdered for their faith. The other one was John, who was in exile on the Isle of Patmos. People don't die for their faith if it's a lie. They watched Jesus be resurrected. They saw him come back. Thomas touched the wounds in his side, and they believed it, and they died for it. And then all those second-generation believers who died. And we've got the recorded Roman history. They died horrible deaths. All they had to do is say, okay, it was a big con job. I admit.
Gotcha.
It was a big con job.
Sure.
I admit. I can go now. And they went, all you got to do is denounce Jesus, and they'll let you go.
Right.
But they were willing to die. We've got millions of martyrs. Right now, there are over 2 billion Christians on this planet, the largest denomination by far. If your God is some New Age God that only you and a few other people know him, your God's not much of a God.
Right.
My God has his word in every hotel room in the land, and my God has got his churches in every city, in every nation. My God was there from the beginning, and not honoring any human being in the Old Testament except a coming Messiah. I'm David. I love King David. He's my favorite guy. Well, look at all the bad things David did. Look at all the bad things you do.
Right.
Would you want God to record those for eternity? But David allowed those things to be. God is in control. He doesn't honor any human being except a coming Messiah. And the New Testament, this perfectly formed book across thousands of years, written by over 20 authors, with this cohesion of a story of an upcoming Messiah, and then how every single one of those prophecies was fulfilled in Jesus in the New Testament. And then these billions of people who have been martyred for their faith, and 20 billion people is good enough for them. Isn't it good enough for you? It was good enough for the disciples to be murdered for their faith. It's good enough for millions of people to be murdered by faith. Isn't it reasonable that there is a God, and there's only one God that a reasonable human being would embrace as filling the role? I'm sorry, Muhammad, 600 AD, where God shows up. Where were you the rest of the time, Lord? Where's all your writing and all? Don't worry about it. Well, where are you going to be? No, don't worry about it. I'm here now. Here's the plan. No, it don't work that way.
Right. So what about all those people? What happened to all those people in that time? Yeah, exactly. He
was there from the beginning. I just really think the solution in the end has got to be greater than ourselves. It's got to be love, and God is love, and all love flows from him, and we can ask for more love.
Right.
And he gives it.
Right. And I think about, you were talking about, that we don't get that glory. If you think about the person who says, "Hey, look at me, look what I did, look at me," and hey, I want you to know I did all that over there. Yeah. Nobody looks at that guy and like, wow, he's the coolest. No, they're looking at, they might think that thing that happened was cool, but they're not looking at him as, oh, okay, yeah, you're awesome now. And they're looking at him. I mean, movie stars, people do that with them all the time, unfortunately. But if you know the person, you're right there. You start seeing if you have any rational brain or you're considering realistic sort of things, you're not going to look at that person as a great person. You're going to think of them as very condescending or very, very arrogant. And arrogance is not something that, because we even talk about, the other side of arrogance, ego, or another portion of arrogance is ego. When you're trying to either lead people or help people or develop people or do something for the betterment of others, you throw your ego in there, it ruins the entire thing. The minute you pull that ego out of there, you're a better man. Not only are you better, but the whole situation becomes better, and you're actually bettering other people in the process. The less you have your ego.
Yes, and you get joy from that.
Yes, exactly, and that's where the service comes from. Yes,
yes, and there is such joy that comes from that. People try that, and make 5 people smile today. Just try to make 5 people smile today. Right. And try to find, just one good thing you can do for somebody, whether it's to be there for them in their hour of need, to protect them from something, to take a report from them and tell them I'll do everything in my power to help. Take this report from them and to just know that there's somebody that cares and somebody who will try. Right. And to give them some hope in the system and hope that there's somebody who cares. I was driving home yesterday from Louisville, and I pulled into a gas station and was tanking up, and I went in and got some fluids, and a lady walks in and she said, I left my wallet here. Did anybody turn it in? The guy behind the counter says, yeah, and he picked it up and hands it to her, and she opens it up and said, all my credit cards are still there. All my money's still there. And all 3 of us were joyful. She was joyful. I'm just a witness. And he didn't take the money out. He didn't. I mean, all of us were joyful.
That's cool.
That the world can work that way still.
Right.
And that there are people out there, he could have taken the money. The person who turned it in, nobody would have known. Oh, well, got my wallet back, but I had $300 that's not in there now. But no, it was all there.
Right.
And that's the kind of joy that we want to spread. Pay it forward. Don't pay it back. Take that joy and pay it forward. Find somebody to share it with. Find somebody to make them smile, to make them feel better, to let them know somebody cares.
Exactly. Oh. So really quick, I want to go back in time real quick. How did you develop into the man that you are? The guy that goes to Ranger School, the guy that is on all these things and has done a million things, and you can probably talk for hours on all the information, probably days on all the information that you have in your head. Who developed the little guy that was little Davy that grew up into the guy everybody knows as Lieutenant Colonel Grossman? Oh, wow. Who was that little guy? Where was his development?
Well, my dad was a cop, and he was always my hero. And I enlisted in the Army, and I was a paratrooper, and I had Vietnam veterans all around me. And that was a real model for me. But I was a reader. All my life, I loved to read. And if you, back in the day, if you had 10 infantry officers together, 5 of them were trying to shove a book down the throats of the other 5. And one of the books was Robert A. Heinlein's Starship Troopers. Now, somebody knows the movie. The only redeeming characteristic of the movie is it might have got somebody to actually read the book, because the book is transformational.
Oh, really?
And the book talks about a young soldier who goes into an elite airborne type organization, and then goes to OCS, and then serves as an officer. And that really became my life model. Heinlein's Starship Troopers. It's one of the few science fiction books that's been on the officers' recommended reading list decade after decade, along with Orson Scott Card's Ender's War. And but that was really this model set for me. And then I married a wonderful, godly girl. God's brought more people to the Lord with pretty girls than anything else.
Yeah, that's
he kind of prayed me to the Lord.
I believe that.
And really, I like to give the example of forgiving yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And the example I use in Combat Think is a movie, We Were Soldiers.
Okay, yeah.
Once again, and Sergeant Major Plumley, played by Sam Elliott in the movie.
Right.
And this is totally true line. It's totally true line right out of the real world. The 7th Cav, is in Vietnam. They're pinned down. They're surrounded. They're outnumbered. And the battalion, the commander turns to Sergeant Major Plumley. And they can't help but think the 7th Cav is cursed.
Right.
They can't help but think what happened to Custer is going to happen to them.
Right.
He turns to Sergeant Major Plumley and said, now I know how Custer must have felt. And the old Sergeant Major, I tell you, he wasn't very politically correct. Please forgive him.
Uh-huh.
He turns back to the commander and says, Custer was a pussy. Oh, that's, now Sergeant Major Plumley, the battalion commander leaned on him. If you had to find one man who made that battle and that victory possible, it's probably Sergeant Major Plumley, even more than the commander. Those were the heart of it all.
Right.
But was Private Plumley like that on his first day in World War II?
Oh yeah, no way.
Well, was he like that on his first day of the Korean War?
Or first day of boot camp? Was he that?
He fought his way through World War II. He fought his way through Korea. It took 20 years for Private Plumley to become Sergeant Major Plumley. Private Plumley probably wet himself at some time or another, like most combat veterans have done.
Mm-hmm.
Private Plumley probably messed things up and did things crazy. But Private Plumley was there for such a moment as this, to become Sergeant Major Plumley. So there was no event. It was just this constant series of growth. And my heroes in the military have almost always been my leaders. And it surprised me how rare that is.
Yeah.
And law enforcement. But, they knew more than I did. They'd had more experience than I did. Mm-hmm. They had things to teach me. I had some losers. I had a first sergeant as a young sergeant I despised. I had a battalion commander as a company commander that was an abusive person, but over and over again, I had leaders that I could really look up to. Mm-hmm. And every one of them shaped me a little bit. And I would like to hope that I shaped a few people on the way myself.
Sure.
And then you're right. We do amplify our contribution with the books. I got a book coming out called On Hunting. And it's going to be important. It's about why we hunt and what makes us who we are and what we do and why it's important to ecology and to our future and to the wellness of mankind. Just make it this bold contribution. And we keep making that contribution. We keep trying to make the world a better place. We take whatever gifts we've been given. And that was a question my wife and I asked when it's time to get out of the Army. The Army offered me a couple of neat jobs. Clinton was president. The Cold War was over. Mm-hmm. And my wife and I asked the question. My book on killing was already out. I was doing a lot of teaching and presenting. Mm-hmm. How can we best use the gifts we've been given to do the most good?
Right.
To help the most people. When we looked at it that way, it was an easy solution. It was easy.
Yeah.
So, just take that goal. How can we do the most good?
Right.
How can we take the gifts we've been given and touch the most lives and do the most good?
And that's something I've been dealing with, lately. What is your value? And because I there was a time that I'd spoken with a couple guys on here, and they were talking about legacy because they were at that point in their life. At this point, I'm thinking, and you go through stages and you go through these waves of this is what I'm thinking about a lot lately, and now, and the things that keeps getting, whether it's the Lord putting things into your life, people to say things to you or whatever, or whatever the case is. But I'm thinking, what's our value? What is your value right now? What am I able to share to others and give to others and to my team or to my family or to whomever? And what is my value? And so you ask yourself that same question. What is your value? What do you do? What are you able to do? And so I ask people that at work. You go to calls or whatever, and you say, hey, what is your value? What do you, and you don't say, what value are you? You don't say it in that vein, but you say, what is your value? What are you now contributing to your family or to your life or to society or to your community or whatever it is that you do? What is your value? And everybody has a different answer to that. I'm not going to say, well, the value is this. And you say, well, that's not what mine is, but everybody's different. Everybody has a different value system and where they see it is important. But we have to consider, and I say this a million times on the show all the time, is our job on this planet is for other people. We have to be here for other people. Now, and I realized this when I got divorced from my first wife, and I had my kids. And then there was a time when I didn't have my kids, because I'd had my kids their whole life until, for whatever, 8 years or something, until now, all of a sudden I don't have my children for whatever weekend or a week or something like that, because we had to start sharing them. And I would go home and I would from work and I would not know what to do. I had all my chores done, house was clean or whatever, but I had nothing, I didn't know ball games to go to, and I had no practice to take somebody to, and all this different stuff. And so I realized our job on this planet is for people. We have to have, we're not supposed to be on hermits on a mountaintop and deal with ourselves. We need to go serve people, help people, be with people, and spend some time and speak into their lives. Let them speak into ours. That's important, that side of life. And that's what God put us on this planet to do.
Yes. And that's what makes a hero.
Yeah.
Sometimes the greatest love is not to sacrifice your life, but to live a life of sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
Walk out that door every day, to do a dirty, dangerous, thankless job to the utmost of your ability. Because if nobody did it, our civilization would be doomed.
Right.
Not to sacrifice your life, but to live a life of sacrifice. You look online, almost any word salad you can punch together, somebody else has already said. Mm-hmm. No one's ever said that. I can't find it. Sometimes the greatest love is not to sacrifice your life, but to live a life of sacrifice. That's truly my motto. That's my theme.
Yes.
That I try to work together in my classes, my presentations. And I think that's a hero. My dad was a hero. Just quiet daily sacrifice to put a roof over our head and food on the table.
Right. We
got to realize that the people that are just working their heart out for us every day to care for their loved ones, those are heroes. Those are everyday heroes, and they're sacrificing for their family. And what a tragedy when somebody abandons their children. We see so many fatherless families. We see so many people.
Oh yeah.
The last curse in the Bible is out of Malachi, and last curse in the Old Testament. Mm-hmm. And there's a billboard. There's a local graffiti artist who's embraced, and they give him a billboard to put things on. It's usually faith-based. Mm-hmm. And it's got this kind of godlike figure, this figure he always uses with a beard. Mm-hmm. And he looks up and he said, "Father." And then the verse is this Malachi, this terrible, terrible curse on children who abandon their parents and parents who abandon their children, fathers who abandon their children. This is what we're looking at.
Right.
This evil of fatherless families and broken families and people who just abandon their children without being married. So we do the best we can. We all fall short.
Sure.
But I think just that daily process of, even if you only got the kids on the weekend, they're what your world revolves around. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And even if you've only got this is what your world revolves around. You find a way to contribute. You find a way to get wiser and smarter. Maybe you start a podcast that can touch some lives, and you use your time and your energy to do that. What about a concept?
Yeah.
So we just are always striving to find that way to be there for those who need us in the moment of truth, and to find the people who do need us and seek them out and be there.
Right. And that speaks towards, the next mission, like you said, you don't know what you're going to do next. And when you were talking about, do I retire now? What am I going to do next? There's guys that are getting out of the military, whether they're retiring or they're just getting out after their tours and stuff like that. That's where a lot of PTSD is coming from sometimes, where they have issues, and because they're like, okay, I don't feel my value. We're going back to that. Yeah. I don't know what can I offer? What do I contribute? And then they lose that sense of whatever it is that they are or they were in their unit or whatever. And now they're trying to figure out where do I go from here? And so you have to know, well, let's go back to, your why, your value. How can you use that to serve other people? And if you can serve other people, and that's the same thing, the officers or the firefighters or whoever is listening to this, or who it's intended for, you go through a thing where you're just like, I'm struggling because I'm just so, politics is horrible, and, morale is down in the dumps and all this different stuff. Find your mission, the next thing you're going to do to help other people. And you just have to learn what that mission is. And that's the hard part. I think that's the hardest part of all, knowing what your mission is and what is going to what you know you're going to be contributing something to.
And know that you've always got a second chance.
Mm-hmm.
And they can keep being better. Grandkids are God's reward for not strangling your teenagers. They're a second chance. They're better people as grandparents. We're wiser, more self-controlled, and better people. And in the very near future, I may have great grandchildren. I rejoice in that possibility. And so it's forgive yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to be able to forgive yourself, and we know that God forgives us.
Right.
And that makes it, if he can forgive us and we can forgive ourselves, and try to be a little bit wiser and a little bit smarter every day,
mm-hmm.
and achieve a place where we can make a difference in lives. And I think it's a constant growth that can give people great pleasure when they can look back and say, here's where I was, here's who I was 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Here's who I am today. I'm a better person. I'm a wiser person. I have a little more self-control, a little more experience. And I've read some good books. I've listened to some good podcasts.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm a better person than I was 10 years ago.
Exactly.
And that's one of the great sources of satisfaction. And how do you get to be a better person? By surrounding yourself with good people.
Right.
And finding good people to associate with.
Right.
Listening to good podcasts and reading good books. It's all part of the equation.
Yeah. What do they say? If you hang out with the 5 people you hang out with the most is what you're going to be the average of. And if you hang out with 5 geniuses, you might be the dumbest of the geniuses, but you put yourself with a group of 5 dummies, you're going to be a genius to them, because that's what you're just taking on that persona of those. So go find people. You might be uncomfortable, but go find people and hang out with those who are positive, who are encouraging, who are they have their mission and they're working and they're striving to make other people better. Focus on that, and don't always go back to the easy, which is those people who don't want to do much and who want to drag you down with them. So,
and that's the other half of the equation, is to be the kind of person other people want to hang out with.
Right.
To be the kind of person that others want to be with.
Correct.
That constant striving. And I tell people that maybe our greatest contribution will be on our deathbed. And we can have such grace, and we can have such faith,
mm-hmm.
And that we will be like this shining light to others. That might be our greatest moment.
Yeah.
Most of us won't die in some tragic life and death event. Most of us will die in bed somewhere, some disease,
mm-hmm.
And we like to think that we can do that with grace.
Right.
And it's all about just whatever's placed in front of us, doing the best job we can, like I found out in Ranger School, it's the one that goes that extra mile. It's the one that has that energy, the one that's ready to help out.
Mm-hmm.
That when things are coming unglued, people look up to.
Right.
I'm the kind of cop other cops make fun of. You don't make fun of me no more. Be that kind of.
Exactly.
Push that envelope in. And don't worry what other people have to say about it. You just answer to yourself and God and your family.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else is minuscule. And that's our book, Bulletproof Marriage, too. We've had enormous success with the book Bulletproof Marriage, 90-Day Devotional.
Uh-huh.
My co-author, Pat Davis, who's a law enforcement officer, did an amazing job with this. But we talk about the fact that sooner or later, you'll retire from your job and your spouse will still be there. Your children will get up and leave. Your spouse will still be there.
Yeah.
Your friends will die and leave and move on. Your spouse will still be there.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we learn, we mess so many things up, but we do a better job the next time. And being able to dedicate yourself to what's really important. And the only thing that will stay with you through most of your life is going to be your spouse, if it goes well. And then, of course, eternity afterwards is what it's really about. And so we just try to find ways to be better people. We forgive ourselves because we know God does, and move on from there.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that we deal with the most. I think I deal with the most is I have a hard time forgiving myself. I look at that, I something I did back when I was, 25, and I'm just so I can't believe that, and I'm ashamed of myself. Yeah, but
I've got things like that. Things like that pop up in your head.
Yeah.
You know what I did? And I put it in the book on spiritual combat. I've got a list of happy thoughts, things I remember that make me feel good, things I remember that work out well. And, the happy thought blessing list. And I'm serious. I'm absolutely serious. There's when things start coming, this is my happy thought blessing list here, and
oh man,
on and on and on.
You're just scrolling up and up on your phone. Yeah.
every time I think about something good that happened, a good thought, I go in and plug it in. You know,
Man, for those of you just listening, he is scrolling. He's already scrolled, looks like 20 times on his phone, and it's just this continual list that he's scrolling up.
It began with one or two things, but I can look back at them, and it makes me smile. It makes me feel good. It's a happy memory. It's a warm memory.
Yeah.
You know, it's a time I got something right. You know, it's a time that something made me laugh. You know, my dad and I, one little one, it comes out of nowhere. My dad and I at a campfire one night, got this goofy little dog that we'd picked up. You know, I was, you know, we grew up with dogs, and the dogs wandered around the campfire and sniffing around. This little dog, you know, I got a little .22 caliber pistol. We'd done some shooting, and we're elk hunting. And Dad says, you know, if that dog brings back a bear chasing him, you know what to do? I said, no, I think, you know, 22 against a bear. He said, yeah, shoot the dog and run like hell. You know, it's a warm memory of my dad, you know. Put on the happy thought list. Put on the happy thought list.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, that's good. It's like one of those stories where you tell people, you know, and you just maybe tell them whatever story, and everybody's kind of laughing, whatever, and then you tell a story, and everybody just dies laughing. You're like, I didn't realize it was that funny, so you know that you brought joy to everybody in a process. Yeah, that's awesome.
Put it on the list.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example now. Because it's fun. This was a product of the 1960s and 1970s, right? And now I've been able to bring it up. When you think this one through, you realize that it can only be done when the years are in certain sequences. So the story has it that this old sergeant major is in uniform in a corner, and some Washington D.C. party, and he's got to be there, you know, and this young thing walks up to him, and she tells him, I can tell by your uniform that you lead a sad life. I said, yes, ma'am. She said, when was the last time you had sex? Oh, 2015.
Yeah.
Well, wasn't that a long time to go without sex? Well, it's only 4,200 now. Now, you know, in the 2030s, that won't work.
No, you know, no.
It's got to be a little specific little nugget.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly. Okay,
I remember the guy that told me that joke.
I got one for you then. I got one it's 2:00 in the morning. I was working patrol, and I was going to back up another officer who had pulled a guy over on a non-lit street. I mean, it's a rural road. There's no lights around. So I go up there, and we had in-car cameras at the time, and that was it. We didn't have body cameras. This was years ago. And I walk up to the car. He's over on the passenger. He's on the driver's side. He's talking to the driver, and I see the driver kind of leaning around inside the car, but I see that he's alone. I walk up to the car on the passenger side, and I shine my flashlight in the back seat. Okay, nothing. I don't see anything there. I walk up to the driver's or to the front portion on the passenger side, and I'm looking in there, and I hear my partner say, yeah, you got your paperwork? He goes, oh yeah, it's down here. And I look on the floorboard, and there's a bunch of papers on the floor that the guy's kind of leaning over, reaching into. But on the side of the center console, he's got a pistol in a holster, and he's looking up at my partner, leaning over. He doesn't even know I'm there. And he goes, oh yeah, just right over here, right over here, right over here. And I see him put his hand on the pistol, get it on the grip. So I pull my gun out, and I put it right up against him, and I say, don't you move or you will die. And I was as tough as Rambo as you can be, right? And he's, he didn't know I was there, caught him by surprise. Both of us go home. Ultimately, the guy got arrested. Day was saved. So my partner goes to the jail. He's going back. He goes back later on that night, right as a report. And he's typing, and he goes, hey, do you want to see the video from earlier tonight? I said, yeah, let's take a look at the video. So we walk in there. I'm looking at the video on there, and it shows me walk up to the car. You know, he's already there. He shows me, I'm kind of just walking up, look in the back seat, look up to the front, and you see me kind of step back with my eyes big like that, but it's all quiet because there's no audio yet. All of a sudden, you see me pull my gun out and go, don't you move, or I'll do this! and so I said, what'd you do to the audio? And he goes, I didn't change the audio at all. That's all you.
Well, I'll give you another one now. One of my personal heroes is Gordon Graham, a law enforcement.
Oh,
trainer.
yeah.
And Gordy does a thing. You know, he's a retired California Highway Patrol sergeant.
Right.
And he said, crooks aren't afraid of tough cops. They're afraid of crazy cops. He said, they're really scared. So he said, take a little G.I. Joe, put him in your pocket so it's sticking out there. What do you think, Joe? Should we kill him? That's pretty politically incorrect nowadays, so training goes.
Yeah.
But I was thinking, just that voice might actually scared him more.
That could have been. It could have been.
Cops aren't afraid of tough cops. They're afraid of crazy cops.
Right. There was a. I got another story for you. Then there's a cop. He's dealing with this guy. He's down kind of in this water line of this river, and the cops tell him, "You need to come up. You're under arrest. Come out of the water." He goes, "No." And he's mouthing off. He's doing this whole thing, and he's posturing, and he's talking about, "Come on, I'll fight you. I'm not afraid. I'll fight you." He's got his fists up, and so the cops gets on his radio. He goes, "Well, he's down on the water line. He says he wants to fight. I'll just wait for my second unit." Second unit shows up, and this guy is known to be just the toughest man in the area, right? He walks up, he starts putting his gloves on. Walks up there, and the guy in the water says, why is he putting his gloves on? And he's still posturing and so the guy, really quiet, and he's like, "You said you want to fight? I want to fight. Let's fight." And so the guy just turns around and puts his own hands behind his back. We also joked about, maybe I read this in an article. The guy said, carry a mouthpiece with you. So if somebody starts wanting to, like an old boxing mouthpiece or football mouthpiece,
like a boxer, right?
So when they start posturing up, okay, hang on, okay, let's do this, and so and because it's just mental stuff, you don't really intend to do that, but the jokes are from articles that we've read of things like this happening, and it's just so.
Yes. Or,
it's good.
That's sense of humor, brother.
But it's positive.
We give the honor and glory to God, and He gives us the joy.
Right, and I think you mentioned that in one of your books, where you that whole idea of you have to have that downtime. You got to have that dark humor. You got to have that because you see so much evil. You see so much negativity and darkness. You got to have that, because there was a time when at night people, and I think you put this on combat, is that at night, back in the years and years, hundreds of thousands of years ago, guys at night, they wouldn't be fighting. The wars weren't going on. They'd sit around the fires and they would talk and they would tell stories and they'd tell these things. And that was therapeutic. And the same thing with, you mentioned it on Killing, the ability to come home after wars, where being on the ships and being able to be therapeutic with this and all that. And then all of a sudden we don't have that anymore because we're fighting at nighttime because of lights and because of night vision goggles, and then we have the other side of guys coming home, and they could be very well the next day after being in a firefight. Now they're home holding their baby. How is that? How do you have a chance to get it off, get that pain out of there, the darkness away from you? But
they do it. That's one of the things too we should talk about. Kind of close the loop on this, maybe.
Yeah.
One of the things I talk about in my class is no pity party, no macho man. Find that middle road. Don't go into combat thinking it'll destroy you, but if there's a problem, deal with it.
Right.
And there's so much goofy stuff about our troops right now. Like 22 veterans a day take their life.
Yeah.
Well, the word veteran, it is different than combat veteran.
Mm-hmm.
And in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, they drafted everybody. They were all veterans. Most of those 22 veterans a day who take their life are 70, 80, 90-year-old men. Every suicide's a tragedy.
Right.
But suicide among the elderly is a totally different subject. So they want you to think those 22 veterans a day are all from the current war. It's a liable mission. And then, and there are, suicides, and they are an issue. Sleep deprivation is a key component in suicides. It blindsides people. Mm-hmm. But also, we think they all have PTSD. But the best research tells us 5% of the troops who deploy to combat contract PTSD. The British studied their troops in Afghanistan, 5%. Mm-hmm. The Dutch study, 5%. Now, when we look at the ones who claim PTSD, when they get out to get disability, that's a different topic.
Sure.
But as far as the ones who we can actually diagnose with, and around the planet, diagnosis come back about 5% contract PTSD. And we got this expectation they all have PTSD and they're all suicidal. And when the truth is just the opposite. And the point I want to make, I believe with all my heart a new greatest generation is rising up.
Mm-hmm.
Nietzsche said, what doesn't kill us only makes us stronger, but Nietzsche stole that from the Bible. 2,000 years for Nietzsche, Romans chapter 5, we glory in tribulation, tells us the exact same thing. The idea of being stronger from the bad things in life is not a new idea.
Right.
And I tell you that everybody listening here, hero, they're following the hero's path. They're leading their way down to the hero's journey, and they're trying to strive to make their world a better place. And they must believe that when we look at the greatest generation that came home from World War II, what about 20 years of war? What kind of people are coming home from this war? And we look at these incredibly violent times with law enforcement beyond anything we've ever seen before.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, a certain portion are going to be hurt, but it can become post-traumatic growth. And we all need to understand that post-traumatic stress, even those who have post-traumatic stress, it becomes post-traumatic growth. We're good at treating it. And there is a magnificent new greatest generation rising up in these dark times.
Yes.
And it really is one of the greatest sources of reassurance for me to see people like you, combat veteran, law enforcement veteran, these dark hours, a real deep thinker, putting together this podcast to touch lives and to communicate with others. This is deeply reassuring to a burnout old geezer like me to know that there's this generation rising up for 20 years of war and these staggeringly violent times in law enforcement. And give yourself credit for manning the ramparts with courage and honor, one of the darkest and most desperate hours in our nation's history. Yeah. And your great-grandchildren will talk about you like we talk about White Earp with two cons.
We can only hope.
There was another dark hour, 1776. When the winter of 1776 came on, the Continental Army was all volunteer. Mm-hmm. The next time we had an army that was all volunteer was 5 years into the current war. Nobody left it enlisted before the war. For over 15 years, everybody's volunteer. Well, the last time we fought a war with all volunteers was the American Revolution.
Wow.
And a good chunk, they always had the draft, or there are always people enlisted before the war, got stuck with the war. But so there they are. They're all volunteers. The winter of 1776 comes on, and a lot of them just got up and went home. And Thomas Paine wrote these words. These are the times that try men's souls. Stop. Your soul's on trial. You're being judged by posterity. He goes on to say, the summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will shirk from their responsibility in this dark hour. Are we summer soldiers? Are we sunshine patriots? Or do we stand up for what we love? Do we sacrifice what we love? And then he wrapped up with this. We have this consolation. You ready? Here's the payoff. The more difficult the battle, the more glorious the victory. And I'm deadly serious. The violence of the Old West is a Hollywood myth. Your great-grandchildren will talk about you like we talk about White Earp with due cause. Yeah. I mean, combat tours with the Marines, shootings in law enforcement, manning the ramparts in this dark and desperate hour. And it all comes back around to what I try to wrap up every class with is believe in who you are. Yes. Believe in what you do. We need you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm gonna read one more thing out of On Killing that because I know you're a busy person and you have a ton of things going on, but I want to read one more thing that would kind of help out here that maybe we can close this portion on. So perhaps there is another analogy. According to Carl Jung, there are deeply ingrained models for behavior called archetypes that exist deep in every human's collective unconscious, an inherited unconscious reservoir of images derived from our ancestors' universal experiences and shared by the whole human race. These powerful archetypes can drive us by channeling our libidinal energy. They include such Jungian concepts as the mother, the wise old man, the hero, and the warrior. I think that Jung might refer to these individuals not as sheepdogs, but as warriors and heroes. As stated, 1% of fighter pilots in World War II did nearly 40% of the air-to-air killing. This 1% of World War II fighter pilots, Swank and Marchand's 2%, Griffith's low Napoleonic and Civil War killing rates, and Marshall's low World War II firing rates can all be at least partially explained if only a small percentage of these combatants were actually willing to actively kill the enemy in these combat situations. Whether called sociopaths, sheepdogs, warriors, or heroes, they are there. They are a distinct minority, and in times of danger, a nation needs them desperately.
Hoorah!
It's that when I read that, I was, it's mid book, but I read that and you had to put it down and just reflect on that. And you couldn't go more in depth to the real trueness of that than who the people that decide to serve other people and sacrifice for other people really are. So the heroes that listen to this, yourself, the people that you speak to on a daily basis, it's such a rare breed indeed. So
iron sharpens iron. Two-way street, brother.
Absolutely. So,
all right. God bless and stay safe.
So, Lieutenant Colonel, I thank you very much. I know you got to get going. So, you have my gratitude 100%, and I hope that you stay safe and you have a welcome invitation to come back anytime you want. All right, sir. Have a good day. And Lieutenant Colonel Grossman has left the building, so to speak. What an honor to talk to a man like that. I mean, that is not an everyday occurrence, and I am truly honored to be able to speak to him. Of course, I'm honored to speak to all my guests, but to be able to work it out, it was a long road to hoe to get this gentleman to be on. He's a busy individual. He's got tons of things going. Like he said, he's 65, and yet he's still he's out on the road 200 days a year. So just got back last night, was able to fit us in, and truly, I mean, and the reason is because of all the information that he's put out there, all the information that he does just for first responders, veterans, police officers. The fact that he is willing to do all this research and then provide it to us, and then if you ever get a chance to go to one of his seminars or hear him speak, it's just like that. He wasn't going off of a script. That was him, and so cool. So if you get an opportunity to pick up any of his books, whether it's on killing, on spiritual combat, on combat, bulletproof marriage, assassination generation, pick them up, check them out, look at them. They're honestly such an eye opener. When I was reading them, there's so much information in there that he spent a long time doing research for these books, and they're well worth the read. And aside from that, they are just his mindset to try to be, I guess, a servant of his fellow man. And that is the epitome of what a hero is. We spoke about it. And so if you get a chance, pick up those books. They're on Amazon. You can find them. You can order. You go to Barnes & Noble, go to wherever you buy books. They'll be able to order them for you. It's not like they're out of print or anything like that. Every single one of those books is available. Look them up, check them. And if you happen to go to one of his seminars and you have your book with you, he's probably be willing to sign it. So keep an eye out for that. I do want to let you know that if you are trying to figure out, okay, I want to go back and I want to hear some of these other episodes that we've had or anything like that. If you have not listened to us previously, you can find us at the What's a Hero podcast.buzzsprout.com. That's our website. It has every prior episode on there. Additionally, we have links to, iTunes and Stitcher and Spotify and everybody else, every podcast platform you can think of. We are on there. Go there. You can download from there, subscribe to whatever. You'll get notifications when we put a new episode up, which is usually every Monday. And keep an eye out on our social media, which is Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. At least I'm on LinkedIn. The podcast doesn't have a LinkedIn, but you know what I mean. You can go on there. It has links to the website where you can get your podcast. You can listen to it, or you can go take you to the podcast platform. And what we do is we put up an advertisement or whatever of every new episode, little blurb about who the person is, who the guest is. We get their picture on there, so you know what they look like. You know what I look like. You know what I look like while I'm doing the podcast, because that's the picture that's on there. Whatever the case may be, you can find us that way. Additionally, on social media, you can get a hold of me. You can either reach out to me, send me an email, send me an instant message. You can even comment on whatever episode. Hey, I like that. Hey, I really liked XYZ. Go back. Listen, whatever episode you listen to, there'll be something on our page where you'll be able to go back and find that episode and say, hey, yeah, talk about it. Start discussions on it. I'm totally open into joining those discussions, so let's do it. Nevertheless, keep an eye out for us on all those social media platforms. Keep an eye out for our website and future episodes that are coming up. And to all of our first responders, you guys out there, firefighters, EMTs, our nurses that are in the ER that are ready and willing to support and help other people, our teachers who are helping educate our kids, and our police officers who are on the front line every single day, making sure that we are safe and hold fast. I know the political climate is not the best right now, but hold fast what you do. You know why you're doing it. Figure out your why, develop that, and hold fast to that. Because if it's not for you, who would be doing it? So I appreciate you so much. And that goes for our veterans also, front lines, either overseas or at home. Without you guys, we wouldn't have the country that we have. And like Lieutenant Colonel Grossman said, it is that point that we're at that we could be developing the next greatest generation. And that would make such a difference in a lot of people's lives. So if you are doing right, if you are doing good, if you are serving others, know that what you're doing is right. Know that what you're doing has merit. It has value, and you have value as well. Don't lose that desire to continue to help and serve other people, because right now it's really easy to lose that motivation or the morale. But you have that, and you got to remember why you're doing it. And if it wasn't for you doing it and being that hero, who would be doing it? Without you, we don't have the society or the community that we have. So, for Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, I've been Ken Frownfelter, and this has been the What's a Hero podcast. We are clear.